My name is Christina Theodoraki. I'm editor of Small Business Economics and Entrepreneurship Journal, and I have the great honor to interview today Per Davidsson, who is the 2023 recipient of the Global Award of Entrepreneurship Research, and of course, one of the world-leading researchers in entrepreneurship. Per Davidsson was born in Sweden in 1958. He was educated at the Stockholm School of Economics. He received his PhD in economic psychology in 1989 and became full professor of Jönköping International Business School, JIBS, in 1996. Per Davidsson, he's also held a professor position in entrepreneurship at the School of Management at Queensland University of Technology in Australia. And also he has been founding director of the Australian Centre of Entrepreneurship. Of course, I'm delighted to know that Per Davidsson, we also met at the last Academy of Management meeting that was held in Boston. But also it's very important to state that from 2008, 2007 and 2012, Per Davidsson served as elected officer of the Entrepreneurship Division at the Academy of Management, including him to be the chair of the division in 2010 and 2011. He has also served as associate editor of several leading journals, and he has a lot of publications and contributions in entrepreneurship journals. Of course, Per Davidsson, he is the specialist of the external enablers of entrepreneurship concept, and we will talk more about it in a few minutes. So beyond this introduction, I would like to welcome Per Davidsson, and I would like to thank you very, very much for accepting to give this interview today, to share your insights of becoming a pillar of entrepreneurship research and share your knowledge with us today. Welcome, Per.
Thank you so much for that introduction. My pleasure.
So, Per, let me start my burning questions to you. So you have been emerged as one of the intellectual leaders in the field of entrepreneurship research. So when you are one of the most important professors that established the field of entrepreneurship, and you have been contributed with your knowledge to shape the field. Can you tell us more? Can you tell us how your journey started? How you have been able to become this leader in the field? Did you have any difficulties saved? Can you share with us what was your journey all this year to become the leader or one of the leaders of the entrepreneurship field?
Yeah, I entered entrepreneurship research when it hardly even existed, and it was a very different world. You know, there was no internet. You went to your local library and searched manually for something on entrepreneurship. It was very much entrepreneurship and small business in European entrepreneurship research at that time. And then you found a few things, right? And via the reference lists in what you found some more and so forth. So the literature was very small at that time, and it appeared even smaller since you couldn't find it all, right? So it was a very, very different world. I actually wrote my very first academic paper, I wrote by pencil and had it typed by a secretary. But I wrote my dissertation in software, but in a type of software that is since long dead, so I don't have a soft copy of it. So entrepreneurship, yeah, I was in the section for economic psychology. The culture at the time was very, very free for students to take on whatever topic they liked. And my original topic was small firm growth, which I cast as an aspect of continued entrepreneurship. So what intrigued me was that all the theories seem to take for granted, theories in economics and business take for granted that all entrepreneurs or business founders wanted to grow, right? And you only need to know a few small business owner managers or talk to them to realize that growth may be at best a mixed blessing for them. So So, okay, I can research that. And then when I thought that, oh, this must have been done to death already, about the willingness to grow. But that wasn't the case. I mean, you could take on really big questions then. So that was good. And then I felt that this was a neglected phenomenon, right? This was important in the economy, and it had been neglected because in the era of the large multinational industrial firms, they were the economy, right? And small and new firms were sort of a marginal phenomenon. But that had already changed in the real economy, but we hadn't really embraced that in research so much. So, and I think my taking on the role of not just doing my own research, but sort of building the field, came from that fact that it was so underdeveloped, and although it was important. And I mean, the year after I published my dissertation, I had the cockiness to write a paper called, it's not published as a paper, it was sort of published as a research report, Entrepreneurship and Small Business Research, How to Get Further. And I think it was because I was invited to give a keynote speech. You know, I was just one year out of my dissertation, so that's how I took on the role of that cocky topic. And I also think it was my advisor, who was a very knowledgeable professor, not just in his own field, but he tried to be like a Renaissance person, right? Knowledgeable about everything. And one thing that he did that impressed me was that sort of at the end of a session at the conference, he could sort of tie it together and sum it up. And I took on that kind of role at early conferences as well, right? And then others start to see you as a bit of thought leader, and then when others do that, you start to see yourself a little bit in that role, right? So it hasn't been sort of intentional, but I had reason to. I'm preparing a website now, long overdue, right? And then I noted that the number of publications that are about the field of entrepreneurship it's almost my biggest or my most numerous subfield, right? So I have come back to that, not always in journal articles. It's been books and book chapters as well, right? But yeah, it's something that now it is a little bit more. This article in connection to the award is about of that nature as well. But now, of course, it's become much more difficult to take on that role because the field is so big now, and it is so advanced. A few years ago, I felt I had a good idea of where the field was heading or where it should be heading and so forth. And that is becoming increasingly difficult because it's impossible to have an overview, right?
This is extremely interesting what you're saying, and you also share this evolution of the field, how it increased. And I'm very sensitive to this question, and I ask a lot of thought leaders in entrepreneurship to tell us more about this journey and the moment you created this field. And actually, because you come from other worlds, you come from economics, from psychology, you have psychology or social science and so on. Mm-hmm. So we see in entrepreneurship scholars from different origins, for different places that came and shaped entrepreneurship. So for me, I'm extremely grateful to you all because as I'm a pure entrepreneurship scholar, did my PhD years there and so on in entrepreneurship. So I feel I belong to entrepreneurship. But my question to you would be, because you come from another place, how was this moment? You left your initial origins from economics, from your fields, from your discipline that was recognized, and you decided to shape a new field. Was there behind a strategy? Was it just happen? How entrepreneurship emerged for us?
Yeah. So I came from economic psychology, not so much economics, although I was being closer to economics and psychology rather than management was important, because at that time they had more of a publication culture than management had, at least in Sweden. So I was closer to that. It was still not mandatory to publish in journal articles and crank out several per year or so, but it wasn't as far off as it was for some others. And then I guess I initially saw myself as an economic psychologist, and I happened to take on this topic, and I could, in principle, take on other topics as well, right? And a few years into it, I wondered, can I sustain my interest in entrepreneurship until I'm 65 or some horrendous age, which is this year? and I thought probably not, right? And I was invited to become director of a research center in behavioral transportation research, and I took that on, and I was about to decide to shift, so that this would have been, if you count your PhD years, it would be sort of 8 years in, but only three years out of still I felt that it would be an enormous investment to go into some other field, right? And I already had so much, and there was so much to do in entrepreneurship. So, and it was fun. You could take on big research questions. It was a good community and so forth. So I slowly drifted out of seeing myself an economic psychologist, and I went to the annual conferences up until around 1994 or something like that. So 5 years in, but then I sort of drifted into seeing myself as an entrepreneurship researcher, because there started to be enough of an infrastructure there, right? Small business economics and small business economics started in 1989. The Babson conferences had been running since 1981. You didn't know about those things necessarily back in the non-internet days, right? But the faculty opponent in my doctoral defense, he had sought out the Babson conference. I learned about that, starting to become a Babson regular. I didn't start going to academy until 95, 96, something like that. But it was a growing field. It was a fun field, a very collegial community, and people were genuinely interested in the phenomenon and interested in what research you did. It wasn't until 2001, 2, 3, something like that, then when the conversation is, I had an SMJ, congratulations on your AMJ, right? It was sort of the journal prestige and not the content of the research you talked about. So that was a bit sad. In the 90s, it was definitely interest in the content of what you and your colleagues did research about, and the practical relevance of this. Often more policy relevance than micro level relevance, I would say, but that probably had to do with where the funding came from as well.
This is impressive. And actually, entrepreneurship is all about being proactive, taking risk, and being innovative. And actually, you have followed this behavior in building the field. I'm so grateful to all of you for allowing us to continue to have this field and continue this entrepreneurship discussion. But let me go to another question. So, Per, we have published in Small Business Economics a new paper, a new article, which is in open access. It was published on September 29th, 2023. And it has also a very big impact. And the title of this paper is Per Davidsson, the recipient of the 2023 Global Award of Entrepreneurship Research. This article is co-authored by David Storey, Martin Andersson, Magnus Henrekson, Sarah Jack, Mikael Stenkula, Karin Thorburn, Caroline Wigren-Kristoferson, and Ivo Zander. So a lot of co-authors, so all of them trying to report the importance of your research and you being recognized this year, 2023 Global Award of Entrepreneurship Research. Can you please tell us what is this award and why this award is important to share? Because next generation of entrepreneurship scholars, we are not aware about the importance of this award. So what is this award and how your career led to this important contribution?
Well, thank you. The many authors there are they are the committee, the prize committee, the award committee, plus David Storey, who is was a very valued colleague, and he is listed as lead author. I think he actually had a significant role in drafting the paper. He unfortunately left us in July this year. I know he was dying, and it's quite tragic. So this might well be his last paper. And I think putting him as lead author was not just for show, but I think he actually penned parts of the paper. I think I can recognize him in it. Okay, what was the question now? Well, leading to this award, or about the award. The award was inaugurated, I think, back in 1996, I should say, and it was then called the International Award for Entrepreneurship and Small Business Research. They changed the name in 2008 or something like that to the Global Award for Entrepreneurship Research, which sort of mirrors the development of the field of separating from small business research, right? And it was instituted to increase the visibility and prestige of entrepreneurship research. In the early days, we had a lot of talk about lacking legitimacy. I thought that was BS, but because I couldn't care less about what some snobbish professor at Yale might think about what we were doing, right, or something like that. But of course, the standing of the entrepreneurship journals, the low frequency by which entrepreneurship research was seen in the mainstream journals and so forth, there was quite a lot of building of the field, and the quantitative and qualitative development of the field has been absolutely phenomenal in the recent decade. So, and the award has not been so much on the radar for what we see as, what you and I may see as the entrepreneurship research community, the Babson and the Entdivision crowd, the JBV and ETP crowd, and so forth, because it has quite a lot of the recipients have been economists, the odd sociologists, a more macro perspective. In between 2014 when Shakazara got it and 2022 then when Sarasvati got it, there wasn't many that people in that crowd recognized as leading entrepreneurship researchers, right? But now when Sarah's got it last year and I got it this year, I think that probably makes people more aware of this award. I hope so, at least. And it is the most prestigious award in our field. It is they model the process on the Nobel Prize. Of course, it has about 1/10 of the prestige and 1/10 of the money of a Nobel Prize, but 1/10 of a Nobel Prize is not that bad, right? So of course it's a pinnacle of my career to get this recognition, and it was very nice to read that paper about my contribution, especially towards two things they mention towards the end is sort of the combination of research skills that according to this author that not many have, right? That I do different kinds of contributions, and also that they highlighted the sort of mentoring and field building role, because I mean, even if I have had a significant own research stream and have been relatively successful in getting recognition for that in terms of citations and so forth, I have spent a lot of my time doing research leadership and sort of making it possible for others to flourish as entrepreneurship researchers. And maybe you asked before how I could sort of take this thought leader role. One important thing was a major program we had at JIBS in the late 1990s into the early 2000s. The program in entrepreneurship and growth in entrepreneurship, externally funded by, back then, $3 million US, which was significant. And then I had to take on a leadership role when we got that money, right? And and then again when I got the chance to build up the Australian Centre for Entrepreneurship Research. So I've actually had my most productive years in terms of journal output after COVID. I stepped down from the center leadership in 2018, and that obviously did wonders to my output. I also have 2003 as a very good year, and that was because after having led that program at Jönköping, I had a sabbatical in 2001. And then I had time to get some significant publications out as well. So, yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing this important award. And for me, I would like to congratulate, and on behalf of the editorial board of Small Business Economics, we would like to congratulate you for accomplishing and receiving this very, very important award and advancing the entrepreneurship field. But let me ask you now the hard question.
Okay.
So it's very important award. We see it so prestigious it is. We see all this contribution that is also resulting in all of these years of engagement and contribution and continue providing new insights in entrepreneurship. Can you please tell us what were the key moments in your career or the major choices you needed to take that probably now led to this amazing award that enabled this success? For example, you can see young researchers say, okay, this award of finality, this is also a motivation to continue to contribute. Is there, and we are sure that there could be some moments or choices probably that needed to be taken, some sacrifices probably, or some key moments that probably lead to accelerate, to increase your success, and of course that led to this award. Can you remember, can you share some of them?
Yeah, as you know, I believe in external enablement, right? And in not attributing all of the success to the agents themselves, right? And that goes for me as well. So of course, I've contributed to my own success by sort of not being overly tactical and sort of doing what is expected, but sticking out my neck a little bit, right? But very significant external enablement. When I was a few years into my career, they decided to start a new business school in Sweden with entrepreneurship as one of their specialties. I mean, how many academics does that happen? So I was recruited to Jönköping, reluctantly moved there because it was laughed at by academic Sweden at the time, right? There was no academic tradition in Jönköping. We were never going to be successful and so forth. And then we had an absolutely fantastic development and are ranked number 1 or 2 in the country in business research, in impact business research in recent years. So that has been held up long after I left my full-time position there. So of course, getting into that environment where entrepreneurship was not something marginal that you had to do on the side of having, for most entrepreneurship scholars back then, their professorship was in something else, right? And they did this for fun at the margin of the time and resources they had available. Here I suddenly was in an environment where this was the main game, right? And it was also a very allowing organization, because it was like we started from a clean slate. Everyone came there with and brought with them the good things from where they came, and left all the bad things in the old place. We had very little of unnecessary bureaucracy and so forth. It was a very good environment. Then the next big thing was that we got this big external infusion of money for the program for entrepreneurship and growth in entrepreneurship, and that was initiated by the Wallenberg Foundation. It wasn't us turning to them for money; they came to us, and of course they came to us because one of the younger Wallenbergs who were taking over had an interest in the small business entrepreneurship area, and we had shown some ability in that area. But of course, it is luck again, right? Then that you get that kind of infusion, and to take on that role at just the right stage of your career. So I was then towards my late 30s, right, ready to take on that leadership role, and I was given that kind of resource without the bureaucracy of having a big EU grant or something like that. It was like I called them once a year and I was there, do you want me to come and make a presentation? Do you want a report? Right? So it was extremely allowing in that regard. And we made good use of the money, you know. So these are two external things that really has helped. What in myself that has helped is that I haven't been overly strategic and tactical about my career, and I haven't shunned. I have done things that I found interesting and important, and luckily enough, that has been aligned with what other parts of the world have found somewhat interesting and important as well. But there is not 100% correlation between what I think are my best works or my most important works and which are most cited, right? But there is at least some correlation. The big irony is an unpublished paper on entrepreneurial intentions that still is on my top 10 list and cited more than 1,200 times, more than 1,300 times, I think.
This is also some very important to understand how some papers make an impact and how they're perceived by the community. But I would like before ask you to tell us more about another new paper we published in Small Business Economics. So we published a paper which is in open access. It was published on September 26, 2023. So September was a very nice month in Small Business Economics with a lot of contribution from Per Davidsson. And this paper at this time is entitled, it's Making Contributions. It's your personal reflections from the co-creative evolution of entrepreneurship research. So drawing on this paper, can you tell us more what is the article about?
Yeah, I was invited to write this paper in the capacity as recipient of the award, right? And then I thought, oh, now I would like to write a really important paper here, right? So what I did is sort of reflections on the development of our field and my role in it, or examples from my own career, because that's the examples I know best, and how we have turned from sort of broad empirical fact-finding exploration in the 1990s into some more theory-driven research in the early noughties and so forth, and the enormous development of the size of the field and the quality and the prestige of our journals and so forth, and examples of and then I sort of tried to broaden the view of the contributions, because there's been so much about focus on theoretical contributions and so forth. So I my text revolves around what we do as scholars in order to make contributions. Well, we come up with ideas. Sometimes we call those ideas theories, right? About how the world, some part of the world works. And we also build evidence, data, and results. And this is very different kinds of activities, is thinking up ideas and doing empirical testing. If you look in physics, for example, they're completely different people who do these things often, right? And so sometimes you have physics Nobel laureates have come up with some great theory, and other times you have those that have come up with some ingenious contraption that makes it possible to test something that was thought almost non-testable. In a field like entrepreneurship, it has been possible to play in all those arenas. So ideas and evidence, concepts I take as a category of itself, although it feeds into theories, of course, and methods contributions, right? Ways of doing things, yeah, because it's been a young field, and according to what I've seen, the needs I've seen, I've sort of played in all those arenas. And over time, according to my Swedish colleagues at the time, I started out as a number cruncher, right? They were many have frowned on quantitative research, you know. When I came to the US with the very same research, I was like, oh, conceptual guy. Because I sort of had a theoretical model that guided that I came up with, that guided my dissertation work. So, but over time, I've gone from more sort of a quantitative empirical researcher to becoming a theorist in my in my later years, with the opportunity reconceptualization and later the external enabler framework, which is mostly so far conceptual papers. Right?
You're talking about the external enablers, and it's been a key element, a key concept, a key theory of your contribution, or an approach framework. So what it is the external enablers and why it is important? Can you describe us, to give us more insight on this very important topic?
Yeah, so it started with the entrepreneurship nexus, the individual opportunity nexus, Shane and Venkatarama. Scott Shane presented this paper in Jönköping before it was published. We were right at the center. Saraswati presented her effectuation theory in Jönköping before it was published as well. So, and I thought that was a very good contribution at the time. There was many. I have in print listed a lot of dot points about what was good about it, but what I found problematic right from start was how they conceptualized opportunities. As firstly, it was inconsistent, because they said, on the one hand, they say that opportunities are combinations of favorable circumstances in the environment. On the other hand, they talk about selling one's opportunity. You can't sell external circumstances. So as Shane lamented in his 2012 reflections, they mixed up the favorable external circumstances and the envisioned future venture in the entrepreneur's head, right? The idea. So that was one of the problems, the inconsistency, and it was also the way they conceptualized objective opportunities as pre-existing entities. It was as if the mirror image of the venture to be already existed out in the environment, right? So of course that was rightfully criticized for various reasons, and then came Alvarez Bani with opportunity creation, which I thought was completely unnecessary to cast as. I mean, what they talk about was creating ventures. It wasn't about creating opportunities, right? So that only led to a lot of confusion, and I was very frustrated with how it was very good with the focus on opportunity, in the sense that it moved focus to before the venture is completed, right? So it's the early journey of creation of new ventures, and that I think should be the core of entrepreneurship research. That is where we can make our most unique contribution to the broader field of economic and organizational studies. Right? But the conceptualization of opportunities became very problematic, and there were others who wrote about this as well, that they mean too many different things. So I wrote a conference paper in 2012. It was good enough to get the best conceptual paper already at AOM, but that was 10% of the work on that paper. That wasn't even that. So later that year, I made a really heavy. I had a few months of sabbatical. I basically only worked on this paper in my summer house in Sweden, in my mom's summer house, I should say, in Sweden. And then when I had come up with this fantastic manuscript, I sent it to AMR, and it got rejected. Actually, it started with, initially it should just be a dialogue piece in AMR, where I criticized some things in Shane's reflections in 2012. And then I was actually invited to expand it to a full paper, which was summarily rejected by another editor. And it was an overambitious paper that I sent them. So luckily it didn't get accepted in that. And then there was one of my postdocs that suggested I make it an org science perspectives piece. And then for once I took the advice we often give, that to find a role model paper and fill that with my contents, right? And my role model paper was another core critique of a field, namely Chet Miller et al.'s The Myth of Firm Performance, which sort of attacks how the field of strategy deals with what is their core construct. So that was partial inspiration, and eventually I got this published in Journal of Business Venturing. It is one of my favorite boasting points today, is that this is the most cited paper in JBV since its publication. I was lucky enough to be 1 year after Ethan Mollick's crowdfunding paper, which has about 5 times as many citations. So that is just crazy, right? And then I thought, had the argument that what we talked about as entrepreneurship, as entrepreneurial opportunity, needs to be discussed in 3 different concepts. It is external neighbors for the favorable external circumstances, and they are not sort of entities out there. These are things that can be of a little help or a lot of help, and they can come in different combinations. They don't become combinations out there. They become combinations in someone's head, right? And then new venture ideas as a separate concept about sort of the imagined or envisioned future ventures that directs action. And then I separated out what I then called opportunity confidence from this as well. So external neighbors and new venture ideas are about the contents of those external circumstances or about those ideas. The subjective sense of favorability in these is a separate concept. And that was necessary because you can have one new venture idea or discuss one external circumstance. And people can have completely different opinions about how favorable this is or not, right? So they are separate, and the same individual over time can be convinced that something is the best idea since the poisoned arrow early on, and then later on this idea sucks, right? So to call that an opportunity and then say the opportunity failed, or I don't believe in this opportunity anymore, it just becomes a very strange way of talking, because when we call something opportunity, that means that someone thinks this is favorable, right? Anyway, And then I thought that new venture idea was what I really was going to focus on and develop something, hopefully something like the equivalent of the big 5 personality characteristics, sort of the 5 most salient generic characteristics of new venture ideas. But instead, I was led down the external enablement track, serendipitously, and in that continued work, I found so much more potential in that concept that I had realized myself when I first suggested it in 2015. Right? So the long answer here. So the first reason was to come up with something better, to realize the intention behind Shane and Venkat's idea about the individual opportunity nexus. Of course, we have since stopped talking about single individuals and more about teams and distributed agency as well on the agent side. Then I was invited to write an essay for AMD, Academy of Management Discoveries. And in doing that, I realized that the external environment had been very stepmotherly treated in both entrepreneurship and strategy research for decades. It was completely different back in the 70s and 80s when you had population ecology, and then you had Porter with sort of industry structure and all that, and you had strategic issues, but they also talked about opportunities and threats, and so for the external thing you had environmental scanning literature, and there's some else that I and then it turned inward, right, to firm resources and capabilities in strategy and in also a lot of the individual characteristics of and qualities of entrepreneurs. So there was a general neglect of that. So this idea of external enablement sort of responded to a broader need to have conceptualizations that allowed us to do more about the strategic use of external circumstances, right? And major changes in the world have driven a renewed interest in external factors. It's not just external enablement, it's broader, this renewed interest in external factors. Then we, after having presented the external enablement framework with more detailed categories and vocabulary and so forth, we reviewed past research on entrepreneurship so it was working a bit backwards, right? So it was only after that we did a systematic review of past research into entrepreneurship in response to various types of external changes. So that's what I forgot to mention. So external enablers, as we now refine it, is any kind of macro level change to the business environment. So this can be new technologies, it can be demographic change, it can be macroeconomic change, it can be socio-cultural changes like the growth of veganism and so forth. It can be natural environmental change, it can be regulatory changes, right? The reasoning being that well, past research, firstly, in leading business journals, the literature was relatively small. It was also, even though we looked at FT50 journals, it was surprisingly weak on theory, even though in those prestigious journals, right? So often atheoretical or theoretically eclectic, so indicating that people didn't really have a good theoretical framework to build on. The only recurring framework was institutional theory, and that was about a fifth of all the submissions. And we also noted that the research tended to be separated by type of environment. So you had technology research, and of course outside the FT50 you have a lot of that in technological innovation and so forth. You have regulatory changes, so there were separate subfields and very little cross-referencing. So our idea was that, well, to some extent, these types of changes have characteristics that apply to all of them, like the scope, right? The range of impact, or the onset, whether it happens rapidly or slowly, more predictably, or just like a completely sudden and unexpected. And the changes can provide similar benefits, which we call sort of enabling mechanisms. And they can play similar roles in the venture creation process. They can be part of the reason you try to start a business in the first place. They can be the main reason or contributing reason, which we call triggering. During the journey, they can be shaping. The technology or a regulatory change or all those things can affect what the product is, or what the product features or service features. So that is shaping. It can also shape the venture creation journey, like in our paper about IT hardware the IT hardware startup boom. One thing there was how 3D printing made prototyping much faster and cheaper. So that influenced the venture creation journey without necessarily being visible in the end product or service. And then, of course, it can be outcome enhancing, those changes. And that's why they're triggering as well, because people think they will be outcome enhancing. So these are things that apply not just to one type of environmental change, but you can discuss this. So that makes it possible to accumulate knowledge about the strategic use of external change across those different types of change, and that is what we hope we'll be able to facilitate by offering those tools.
It is very interesting to hear all this evolution and what was the challenging that shaped like the discussion and also your reflection related to external enablement. Can you tell us what is the future of entrepreneurship research, and identify probably one or two directions you think that we will stress the next years, or probably your suggestion or where the field should go? So very briefly, one or two topics that you think it will be the next impactful or important ideas, or probably the ideas you're working on.
I used to find it easy to sum those things up and make suggestions. This is where the field has now getting so big and advanced that I don't think I can make that kind of predictions. I hope that the external enablement is not a fad, that is something that is going to be developed and not destroyed by overuse or which happens sometimes with new concepts, and sort of it becomes a catch-all for all things for all people, right? Instead, I hope that others will pick it up and take it to places that we originators couldn't have come up with ourselves, right? So and I think there's a real chance that will be one of the things that will continue to develop in coming years. Then I've had a lot of which I missed for a long time, which focused on the individual, but not on dependent variables on the deep individual level, right? So up until 10-15 years ago, it was individual things that related to firm outcomes. Now there's been a lot more about interest in the individual on the DV side as well, with well-being and things like that, right? And poverty alleviation, they're completely different strands, but there's been much more of that. I think that is going to continue as well. We will all be massively impacted one way or the other from artificial intelligence in different versions. How that sort of specifically impacts entrepreneurship. I would say the two biggest enablers right now is AI as a technological enabler, and it is climate change and the sustainable transformation challenge that comes with that. That is going to drive a lot of entrepreneurship, and whether people cast this as external enablement or not, I think there's going to be a lot of entrepreneurship research around these two, and hopefully the combination of them as well.
Per, it's very interesting your suggestion about external enablers. And in our discussion, you were saying that we're lacking of theories and theorization. Can you tell us if, for example, I want to use external enablers in a research or other researchers, what is the most suitable theory that explain external enablers, or you like, or it could probably provide some more explanation for theorization using this framework?
I see it as a versatile toolbox, right? So the external enabler framework is not a theory, because the framework itself does not make statements about relationships. So it is for example, one advantage of institutional theory is that it has a history and legitimacy, but it doesn't have a lot of detailed vocabulary specifically for entrepreneurship. Parts of the external enabler framework can easily be borrowed into an institutional perspective, and where you take the effects further than just legitimation, which is where it typically tends to land, and have more specific effects that are particular to entrepreneurship, right? It's also important to realize that the external enabler framework is not meant to be. It's not intended to that you should engage with all of that in any one study. There may be parts of it that are relevant to one study and parts of that. And then I think a lot of it is going to be about the agent enabler interplay, right? How entrepreneurial agents make use of external enablers, strategically or fortuitously, and in that interplay, that can take the form of extensions of already and refinements of already existing agent-focused theories, right? So the notions of absorptive capacity and dynamic capabilities and so forth are quite coarse-grained and they could be taken to more precise predictions if you also consider variance in the external challenges that they are applied to, right? So you have this variance both on the agent side and on the environment side, and how they match. I think that is something that I would like to see it used in that sense, as extensions and refinements of existing agent-focused theories.
Thank you very much for sharing these insights. And we arrived towards the end of this this interview. I would like to ask you a last question about your insight and your advices to young scholars, young entrepreneurship scholars that start their journey. A lot of times we struggle also with research, how we do our research, how we drive also our behavior in this field, and how we follow our entrepreneurial journey. So what would be your advices that you think, what would be your thoughts to help these young scholars, the next generation of entrepreneurship scholars that want to engage to build this field?
Okay. In some respects, I'm the worst person to ask that, right? Because it was a different world when I entered it. And my process of becoming a better scholar has been very unsystematic and serendipitous. So one thing you can do now is there's so much codified knowledge now, right? So it is much easier to systematically learn this game. and that you should do. You should learn what it takes to do good research, and not just be good at publish, because good at publish it's much easier if you have a well-designed study from start, right? So they learn about doing it right at all stages of the research process, and that is now much easier to get access to that knowledge and absorb that knowledge than it was for us. But don't become too much of just doing all those right things, right? If you want something more than just securing a first job and having and hopefully securing tenure eventually, if you really want to give yourself a chance to have some kind of impact beyond that, I think you need to find some area of passion where you think something is underdone. Stick out your neck a little bit more in that, right? So both play this nowadays necessary and safer career game, but not getting stuck in that. And I have one wonderful example. I'm not going to give you a name, but someone who was very impressive and published in the right places and so forth, but didn't really have a takeoff in terms of citations, and who has more recently found an area that they are passionate about, which is related to their own personal experience, and which has also led to bringing in research money, appearing in media and so forth. So it's not just about impressing your peers in prestigious journals, but you're doing something that has another kind of, and some kind of parallel to that was also the young Dean Shepherd, right? When he, apart from doing other things, he wrote this AMR paper about grief, and he made the sort of the metaphor of comparing the loss of the company with the grief of losing a loved one, and that was also built on personal experience with the demise of his father's family business, right? So, which was a very traumatic experience, and he has continued to sometimes use that. So, I mean, when he wrote about those sort of social entrepreneurship in response to natural disasters, the Black Saturday wildfires. I mean, his aunt was about to perish, and her property was vanished in that fire, if I remember it correctly. So he has done some parts of his. I mean, he's the absolute master in playing the publication and career game. Right? So I don't know anyone who manages his life and career as well as Dean, but. There is also this element of making use of things with personal relevance.
Thank you very, very much for all the insights, advices, and so inspiring discussion, Per. It was a true pleasure for me. So on behalf of all the entrepreneurship community, I would like to congratulate you again for this award, for your contribution to Small Business Economics Journal, and also to all of us that continue to develop and contribute to the entrepreneurship field. We are a community, and it's very important to have all this share of insights. So I would like to thank you again, and I'm sure that our listeners will enjoy so much this interview as I did.
Okay, thank you very much. I enjoyed it as well.